Folks, you know my next guests for their work with raising my uncle and mother, but you may know them better as the people who have been in every activity I've ever been in since kindergarten. Please welcome my grandparents.
Here today.
Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for asking us.
Glad that you guys matched.
Well, it's Friday.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We're Red Friday.
Okay.
That's right.
So I called you guys here because we are going to talk about the civil rights movement because, as our viewers at home may not know, you guys lived through the civil rights movement, a little bit of it, right?
Yeah.
So
we were in high school in
Yeah.
1968.
Yeah. So before I ask the questions that I have down, because these are great questions, the best questions, is there any memories or anything that you guys can think of that sticks in your head when you hear about the civil rights movement?
Yeah, in March of 1968, our basketball team in high school was in the finals, and they won the championship, but we were playing in Omaha school with predominantly black kids, and it was just really uneasy when we came out because we won, and so we were all excited about winning, but the whole feeling seemed like it wasn't just about the basketball game, it was about the white kids from Lincoln against the black kids in Omaha. It was just that feeling, it was really uneasy.
And I remember administrators and teachers were pushing all of us to break up groups, to get going. We had one guidance counselor who was knocked to the ground and beat up a little bit by some of the students from Omaha, and that was kind of scary to be part of and seeing going on.
I know this isn't a good joke, but did the refs call a foul on that?
It was after the game.
Yeah, it was after the game. It was
Okay.
outside.
All right, so you guys were married in 68?
70.
1970. So that's a little bit...
We graduated in
You
68.
graduated in 68. So obviously, MLK was assassinated in 1968. Do you guys remember any of that? Were you guys...
We were in school.
Yeah.
And TVs weren't in all the classrooms back then. There was one in the library, and there might
We
have
didn't have
been,
any cell phones. There was no.
there wasn't what there is today, but I remember that it came over. The principal came over the intercom, and back then it was intercoms, and said that this had happened, and that we should all, when we left school, go directly home, because they didn't know, law enforcement didn't know what was going to happen because of what happened.
So this, you're talking about having to go directly home. This is Nebraska in the 60s. Did you guys go to a predominantly white school? So
Yes.
mostly white.
Yeah.
That's mostly it.
Okay.
We had a couple African American kids.
Okay.
They were good kids. We got along well with them.
Well, that's good.
They got well with us.
That's all you gotta ask for.
Yep.
Okay, so then I got this next thing. Rosa Parks, the Montgomery bus boycott occurred in 1959. I know you guys were
9.
9. Yeah. They were born in 1950 if you can't do math. Do you guys remember anything about that? I know it's mostly just me asking you if you remember anything.
I don't think so. I think we probably learned more about it much older. When examples of it were on various movies.
Yeah, like Malcolm X.
The one football movie that I can't think of the name of it, but Denzel Washington is in it, and he's the coach, and that's where a lot of that was really seen, was how blacks were treated, and that you couldn't ride a bus. you couldn't drink out of this water fountain because there was a sign on it that said white only.
Did you guys have that when you were growing up? Because of segregation.
Not up here in
Really?
in the
Not
north,
here.
but
No.
down south they did.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just go chronologically because I'm organized like that. So then, 1959, but MLK gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial, not Washington, in 1963. So you guys would have been 13. Do you remember anything about that? Did you watch that or hear that or?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember we.
Didn't pay a lot of. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it.
I did. I think I did. It was probably one of the first times that I remember listening to a black person, and back then they were called black people. It was okay to do that. Send a really strong, positive message that if we would have all just listened to it, we maybe wouldn't be where we are today.
Do you remember anything about it, Grandpa?
I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I do remember hearing him speak, and he was a really good speaker. But I didn't listen to the content as well as obviously Grandma did. But not, just thought it was just a protest, And I know it was a peaceful protest. I remember that because that's just the way he was. He always did peaceful things. And other than that, it was just another day.
It was a good day, good weather, from what I hear. So then 1964, chronologically, comes next after 1963. That's how time works, in case you didn't know. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So, segregation and the Civil Rights Act, segregation became illegal in the Civil Rights Act with 1964. Do you remember anything about that? Did that change how you guys acted towards anything at all?
No, because
because we didn't.
Situation normal, just like
there
always.
there weren't issues here. There weren't issues like everybody's experiencing today.
And back in the early 60s, we lived in Havelock. I lived in Havelock, and it was a all-white area. And I do remember one time there was a big house fire, and so, oh wow, that's the house is really set on fire. And come to find out, a black person had moved in there, and somebody set it on fire.
Wow.
They didn't want blacks moving into the neighborhood there in Havelock.
It is crazy how you never really hear about that in history class. You always talk about how the civil rights movement took place in Alabama and Georgia. You never think of it in Havelock, Nebraska. Okay, and then you mentioned how things are today. We hear a lot of Black Lives Matter protests and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. So, you lived through the most notable civil rights movement. Are you seeing any, comparisons and similarities to what we saw over this last summer?
Well, I think there's some comparison, but it's really, there's so much else that goes into what's going on today versus what there was back in the 60s for us. I think what's going on now has been going on forever, but it just was never, it wasn't as big of an issue as it is today for whatever reason. Whether it's the police, whether it's, how kids are treated at school, if it's social media, it's just different. Could things be done different? Sure, they probably could. Could police treat people better? Sometimes, yeah. I watch the recent shootings of fill in the blank, whoever over the last few weeks, and I wonder to myself, why did they shoot? Why didn't they use their taser? Why didn't they find another way to bring that young person down rather than having to shoot him 6 or 7 times? I think things are going to change. I hope things are going to change, at least as far as the way people are treated because of the outcome of the George Floyd or the Derek Chauvin trial. But things are different. They're just.
Put that at the top of the show.
I didn't have my phone, so I'm just using it.
Gotcha. It's we're on a low budget here. We can't afford cameras. We're shooting this in their basement. That's we got kicked out of the studio. So just we'll remember to do that next time.
Should we take an intermission?
Project. Okay. We will take a quick commercial break, and then right after this, I will ask them a couple more questions. Welcome back. I'm sitting here with my grandparents, and we were talking about the civil rights movement right before the break. And we were talking during the break about a friend that you had in the Navy. Would you go ahead?
We were in the same division, and I was his leading petty officer, or what, assistant leading petty officer. But anyway, we worked together and did things together, and evidently we were going into Seattle, and I have an aunt and uncle there, and they were going to. They invited me to come and spend the weekend, and I said sure, and I asked if I could bring a friend, and they says yeah. Well, as it turned out, everybody else had other plans. They wanted to go see the city, so I went myself, and when I got there, my aunt asked me about my friend, and how come I didn't bring him? I said, well, he had other plans, and she says, well, she knew that he was a black guy, and she says, well, we didn't know how we felt about bringing him to our house. So, that caught me as strange, but okay. And I seen him that weekend in Seattle, and he was with some other friends, and he was with a bunch of black guys from our ship and from another ship, and he was just a totally different person than the guy that had been with all the years I was on the ship, and it was just a different side of him that I'd ever seen. He was talking jive and doing everything else, and black power, and
saying words that aren't appropriate to say on camera.
Yeah, but it just wasn't like him from what I knew him as. So I maybe I guess when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He was with his other friends, and so he fit in there, but it just seemed so out of character for him because on the ship.
What year was this? If you
it was probably 1971, maybe.
Okay, so
70, 71.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is just a little. If you did this, or if you if you would have done this, if you might have been a little bit older, because you were kind of young at the time of the civil rights movement. Like we said with Rosa Parks, you're only 9 years old. So, did you participate or march in or be in any protests of anything?
No, I didn't.
You say
I
yes.
never did.
Yes.
What did you do?
In 1969, I had not much else going on. There was a against the war, the Vietnam War protest, and I just walked along. I wasn't protesting or saying anything. I was just watching what was happening and being part of the moment. Because there was history being made. I mean, we didn't know how this war was going to turn out or what was going to go on, we were in San Francisco at the time, and that was just the city of all that stuff was happening in, and so it was just, or maybe it was in San Diego, but anyway.
One of the sands of California.
Yeah.
Yes.
More I think about it was San Diego because it was up in La Jolla, but anyway. I did do one of the march, and I did try. If I seen a television camera, I did kind of not show my face as much as I could, because the military didn't really care much for us
Protesting.
protesting
Yeah.
the military. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you say that you were in a Vietnam War protest. If you guys would have been older, do you think that you would have marched in a civil rights march?
No, I don't think so.
Back in those days,
They always turned violent.
Yeah.
well, you think about probably the most violent that I recall would have been Rodney King
Yeah.
in California, in Los Angeles. That, I think, years, I don't remember what the year is of Rodney King.
Somewhere in the 90s.
But yes, that's when things really got bad. And the thing that Rodney King always said was, why can't we just get along? And he'd say it to everybody
like the
around
Beatles.
him.
Yeah, like
I
John
love
Lennon.
love.
And he got taken down, much like many of the African Americans now. And
But it seems like the bigger the person
yes.
is, the bigger the guy is, the rougher they get on him, just because of the sheer size and strength of him.
through
Black or
all
white.
of this, one of the hardest parts for me personally, my father-in-law, his dad, I don't know that he was racist,
I'd say pretty much.
but
Really?
yes.
Wow. This is shocking. I've never. This.
He, I remember as your mom and your uncle were growing up, he used the N-word all the time and was very negative against black people. And I remember the hardest thing I ever did was to say to him, if you can't not say those things around my kids will not be coming over here. Because we needed for them to grow up in a time where everybody was the same. And they were being taught in school that everybody was the same, everybody was equal. And I couldn't let my kids hear what their grandfather was saying about those people.
That's. I didn't know that was. Thankfully, the apple has not. The apple is very far from the tree.
Yeah,
The hill
Yes.
that the tree is on is like a 90-degree angle, I would say.
Very much so.
Well,
Very much so.
'Cause,
Yeah,
that was hard.
The only memories that I have with Grandpa Van.
great
Grandpa
grandpa,
Van.
great grandpa.
Yeah, great Grandpa Van. Sorry, get the those things. You know what I mean. Like the only memories that I have with him is going to Popeyes and eating butterfly shrimp, not
Not chicken.
not sitting next
Not sitting.
to a racist.
Yes.
And I mean, that's just, I think it's so shocking for me because you guys and we kind of go to the left. I don't, it's just, it's shocking to me that
he was
is-
a bigot too.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He could do whatever he wanted, but you better not.
He was.
Wow.
But for me, that was in teaching our kids right from wrong.
He was an example to not follow.
That was one that I told your grandpa, I said, we're stopping this. My kids are not going to grow up like that. It was hard.
Yeah.
And in his later years, when you would have known him,
He wasn't quite as
he
bad.
he'd settled down, and
He had settled down.
I
yes.
don't know if but I can, you know, the stories from when I was a kid and the jokes and the, like Grandma said, you know, he just would say anything he wanted to, and it was just embarrassing. And I mean,
Very much so. Very much. Very many times.
You know,
We were embarrassed.
I mean,
Really.
even when he was talking with his brother, my Uncle Charlie, you know, they would tell these jokes and
That were incredibly inappropriate.
inappropriate and not right, and
So.
I just didn't care for it.
Well, that is a knock-knock joke I probably don't want to hear,
No.
because the knock-knock joke will turn violent very quickly.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. It was an honor to interview you guys. One of my
Thank you.
favorite interviews I've ever done, and also one of the only interviews I've ever done. You can catch...
We're right up there.
Exactly. There's a very low bar, and you hit it
We hit
perfectly.
it.
You hit
Awesome.
it. Great work. Great work. You can catch my guests at probably the concert I will have on Tuesday. Everyone, thank you for being here. My grandparents.